You know, sometimes strength doesn't roar. It doesn't always come with applause, achievements, or loud victories. Sometimes strength whispers. It hides behind your quiet moments, in the battles no one sees, in the nights you spent rebuilding yourself when the world had already given up on you. There comes a time in life when you stop needing to prove that you're strong, because you start feeling that you are. And that's the beauty of silence. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. It's in that silence you begin to see who you really are, what you've survived, and how far you've come, even without recognition. Today, I want to share something deeply personal yet universal. 6 signs that you're becoming the strongest version of yourself, even in silence. Because strength isn't always about fighting battles outside. It's about mastering the ones within. So as you listen, don't just hear my words, feel them, reflect on them. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that you've been becoming stronger all along, quietly, beautifully, and powerfully. You know, there's a certain kind of freedom that comes the moment you stop needing to prove yourself to anyone. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, it's calm, and yet it's one of the most powerful shifts you'll ever experience in your life. For years, most of us live with this invisible weight on our shoulders, the need to be seen, to be validated, to be enough in the eyes of someone else. We chase approval like oxygen, thinking that if someone claps for us, loves us, recognizes us, then we'll finally be worthy. But that's an exhausting way to live, isn't it? Because no matter how much you achieve, there's always that little voice whispering, what if it's still not enough? And I get it. We're wired to seek connection. We want to belong. But somewhere along the way, we start believing that belonging means bending, that in order to be accepted, we have to shrink ourselves, edit ourselves, or keep performing for a stage that was never even ours. The truth is, real strength begins when you decide you don't need to perform anymore. When you stop measuring your value through the eyes of others and start measuring it by the peace you feel when you look in the mirror. That's the moment everything changes. You see, people who are truly strong, truly grounded, they don't move from ego. They move from clarity. They don't chase applause because they already know who they are when the room is silent. They don't need to prove their worth. They live it every day, quietly, consistently. There was a time when silence made you uncomfortable, right? When being unseen felt like being unworthy. You'd scroll through your feed, see everyone else winning, and think, why not me? When's my turn? But over time, something inside you started shifting. You began realizing that not all growth is visible, not all progress is loud. Some of the most powerful transformations happen in private, in the stillness of your own heart. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand you. You stopped arguing to prove your point to those who only listen to respond. You stopped trying to fix people's perception of you because you understood. Their perception is not your responsibility. That's strength, that's maturity. And when you reach that place, something magical happens, your energy changes. You start walking differently, you start speaking differently, you start protecting your peace instead of trying to convince others of your value. And suddenly the same situations that used to trigger you no longer have power over you. You become untouchable, not because you're cold or distant, but because you finally mastered the art of self-respect. There's a story behind every strong person in this room. A story of being underestimated, misunderstood, overlooked. But here's the truth. The universe doesn't reward the loudest noise, it rewards the quiet persistence. It rewards the one who keeps showing up when no one is watching, who keeps growing even when no one claps. When you stop needing to prove yourself, you give yourself permission to be yourself. You start making choices not out of fear or insecurity, but out of alignment. You stop chasing what looks good and start choosing what feels right. And that shift, that silent internal shift, is what separates the strong from the desperate. You might still care deeply about people. You might still want connection, love, success. But now you no longer need it to complete you. You've realized that validation is something you can give yourself. That confidence doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being centered. And listen, that doesn't mean you'll never feel doubt again. It doesn't mean you'll never get hurt, but it does mean that when doubt shows up, you'll recognize it for what it is, a passing moment, not a definition of your worth. You'll stop letting other people's opinions become the soundtrack of your life. You'll stop auditioning for roles you were never meant to play, because the strongest version of you doesn't need to shout to be heard. Your presence, your calm, your consistency, they speak for you. People will feel it without you saying a word. And that's the beauty of becoming powerful in silence. It's not about proving who you are, it's about embodying who you are. Every time you choose peace over proving, you rise a little higher. Every time you let go of the need to explain yourself, you reclaim your energy. Every time you walk away from what drains your spirit, you build a stronger foundation for the life you truly deserve. So if right now you're in a season where you feel unseen, unheard, or underestimated, don't fight it. Embrace it. Use that quiet as your classroom, because in that silence, you're not losing yourself, you're finding yourself. And when you finally emerge, grounded, unshakable, unapologetically, the world will notice. Not because you begged for attention, but because you became undeniable. That's what happens when you stop needing to prove yourself. You become the proof. There's a moment in life when everything around you feels like it's spinning. Chaos, uncertainty, noise from every direction. And yet, inside, there's this quiet stillness. That's the moment you know you've grown, because the strongest version of you isn't the one who never faces storms, It's the one who's learned how to stay centered while the storm is raging. Calm isn't something you're born with. It's something you earn. It's built in those moments when life tests you again and again, when people push your buttons, when plans fall apart, when the ground beneath you shakes, and you still choose not to lose yourself. You still choose clarity over chaos. When you're younger, your instinct is to react. Someone says something cruel, and you want to fire back. Something goes wrong, and you want to fix it immediately. We've all been there. That feeling that if we don't control everything, it'll all collapse. But strength doesn't come from control. It comes from surrendering to what you can't change and mastering what you can, your response. There's power in the pause. There's wisdom in stillness. Because when you pause, you give yourself space to see things as they are, not as your emotions first paint them to be. You stop letting temporary feelings create permanent damage. You stop letting anger make your choices. And let's be real, calm doesn't mean you don't care. Calm means you're focused. It means you've reached a place where your peace is more valuable than proving a point. You realize not every battle deserves your energy. Not every opinion needs a reaction. Not every situation requires you to show up swinging. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to breathe, smile, and walk away. People who have found peace in chaos aren't lucky. They're disciplined. They've trained themselves to recognize when emotion tries to take over. They've learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than any defense. They've seen that reacting might feel good in the moment, but responding with intention, with calm, changes everything. You know you're evolving when something that used to shake you to your core no longer even gets a rise out of you. When someone tries to provoke you, and instead of getting angry, you feel compassion. When challenges come, and instead of asking, why me? You ask, what's this teaching me? That's transformation. That's real strength. The truth is, chaos will always exist. The world won't slow down for your peace. But you can learn to move through it differently. You can create calm even in motion. You can be the still point in a spinning world. And when you do that, when you become that, you stop being controlled by circumstances. You start shaping them. Think about it every time you lose your calm. You hand your power to whatever disturbed you. You give it control over your mood, your energy, your day. But when you stay grounded, you stay in command. Calm is not weakness. It's strategy. It's you saying, I see the chaos, I hear the noise, but I refuse to let it live inside me. The most powerful people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who can stand in the middle of a storm and still think clearly. They're the ones who can hear criticism, face uncertainty, deal with pressure, and not let it shake their spirit. That's what being unshakable really means. It's not about pretending life is easy. It's about knowing who you are, no matter what's happening around you. You start to notice that when you stay calm, life starts responding differently to you. Problems don't feel as big. People can't easily manipulate your emotions. You start attracting peace because you've become peace. The energy you bring into a room begins to shift the room itself. There's something deeply magnetic about someone who carries calm within them. You feel it. You trust it. You're drawn to it. And that's who you're becoming. Someone whose strength isn't measured by volume, but by vibration. Someone who doesn't need to shout to be powerful. Someone who's learned that stillness is the loudest form of control. So the next time life throws chaos your way, when someone tests your patience, when a plan unravels, when things don't go the way you wanted, take a deep breath. Remind yourself, I've been through worse and I'm still here. That one breath, that one pause is you reclaiming your power. You can't always control the storm, but you can always control the sailor. You can choose how you steer your ship, no matter how rough the sea. And the more you practice that calm, the more unshakable you become. Because calm doesn't mean the absence of chaos. It means you've learned to dance with it. It means your peace no longer depends on what happens around you, but on what happens within you. And when you reach that place, when chaos comes and you stay centered, you don't just survive the storm, you become the storm's calm eye, unbroken, untouchable, unstoppable. There comes a point in your journey when you realize that holding on to the past isn't strength, it's weight. And no matter how far you try to move forward, that weight keeps pulling you back. You can't run toward your future if your heart is still chained to old pain. You can't build a new chapter if your hands are still clinging to the pages you were meant to turn. For years, many of us live trapped inside memories. What was said, what was done, how it could have been different. We replay old conversations, we rehearse old hurts, thinking somehow that if we keep revisiting them, they'll hurt less. But what actually happens is the opposite. The more you replay the past, the more power it has over your present. The more you bleed from wounds that should have already healed. And I know forgiveness, letting go, making peace. It sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because it's not about pretending it didn't happen. It's not about excusing the people who hurt you. It's about releasing your grip on something that no longer serves you. It's about deciding that your peace matters more than your pain. There's a kind of freedom that only comes when you stop asking, why? Why did they do that? Why didn't they stay? Why wasn't I enough? The truth is not every why has an answer that'll make sense. Some things happen not because you deserve them, but because they were part of the lesson that would shape who you were meant to become. Every person who broke you, every disappointment, every heartbreak, they all became your teachers. Some taught you how to love better. Some taught you how to trust yourself. Some taught you how to stop settling. And when you start seeing your past through that lens, not as preparation, everything begins to shift. See Making peace with your past isn't about erasing it. It's about transforming your relationship with it. It's choosing to see yourself not as the victim of your story, but as the hero who survived it. The person who walked through the fire and came out forged, not fragile. There was a time when you thought healing meant getting over it, but healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means remembering without reliving. It means you can think about what happened and not feel that same sting in your chest. It means you can talk about it without your voice shaking. That's real strength. To face your pain and still choose peace. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. The mistakes you made, the chances you missed, the times you didn't know better. Those can haunt you more than anything someone else did. But you have to remember you were doing the best you could with what you knew then. Beating yourself up for who you were yesterday only slows down who you're becoming today. Forgiving yourself isn't weakness. It's leadership. It's you saying, I learned, I grew. I'm not that person anymore, because as long as you're trapped in self-blame, you can't move into self-growth. And you deserve to grow. You deserve to start again. You might think that making peace with your past means losing something, losing that story, that identity you've carried. But what you're actually losing is the illusion that your past defines your future. The truth is, it doesn't. The moment you decide to stop letting it, it loses its power. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, I'll never trust again. I'll never love again. I'll never take that risk again. That's not protection. That's prison. You built walls to keep pain out, but those same walls are keeping your peace, your joy, your potential out too. Letting go isn't forgetting what happened. It's choosing not to live there anymore. It's standing in the present and saying, that chapter taught me something, but it's not my whole book. And here's what's beautiful. When you finally release what's behind you, life starts to open up in front of you. You stop waking up angry at ghosts. You stop trying to fix people who already showed you who they are. You stop needing closure because you realize that peace is closure. You start to breathe differently. You start to look at yourself differently. You stop saying, look what they did to me, and start saying, look what I built from it. That's transformation. That's real power. It takes courage to forgive, to let go, to release the version of yourself that was built in survival. But that courage will give you something the past never could, freedom. Because when you make peace with your past, you stop fighting the old war in your mind. You free your heart to receive what's meant for you next. You reclaim the energy you've been spending on resentment and use it to build your future. And one day you look back at everything that once broke you and smile, not because it didn't hurt, but because it no longer controls you. You'll see that every scar became a map, leading you here to this stronger, wiser, more grounded version of you. When you make peace with your past, your future finally has room to breathe. There comes a time in your journey when comfort stops feeling like peace and starts feeling like a cage. You know that place where everything is fine, but nothing inside you feels alive, where the days start to blend together, and even though nothing is falling apart, something deep within you whispers, this isn't it. That's the call of growth. That's life trying to pull you toward the next version of yourself. Growth never happens in the comfort zone. Comfort feels safe, but it slowly numbs you. It convinces you that staying the same is easier than changing. It tells you that where you are is good enough, but you and I both know good enough isn't why you were put here. You were built to expand. You were built to stretch beyond what you think you can handle. You were built to grow into your potential, not settle beneath it. The strongest version of you doesn't emerge when everything is perfect. It's born in the moments when life challenges you to evolve, when things stop going your way, when the people you depended on walk away, when the plan you thought was solid suddenly collapses. That's when you're being reshaped. That's when your comfort is stripped away so that your strength can surface. You can't grow and stay comfortable at the same time. One of them has to go. And most people, when faced with that truth, choose comfort. They choose the familiar pain over the unknown possibility. They stay in jobs that drain them, relationships that diminish them, habits that numb them, because at least they're predictable. But growth lives on the other side of that fear. Growth begins the moment you say, I don't know what's next, but I trust myself enough to take the step anyway. When you start choosing growth, everything in your life starts to shift. Your circle changes, your mindset changes, your priorities change. Things that once mattered start to lose their importance, and things you once ignored suddenly start to call to you. You start craving depth instead of distraction, truth instead of comfort, purpose instead of applause. And let's be real, that transition isn't smooth. Growth is uncomfortable because it exposes everything you've been avoiding. It challenges your excuses. It forces you to see yourself clearly, not who you pretend to be, not who people expect you to be, but who you actually are. It's raw, it's messy, it's not pretty. But it's real. The reason so many people resist growth is because it doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like falling apart. You lose friends. You lose interest in things that once defined you. You start questioning everything. But here's what's really happening. You're shedding. You're outgrowing your old self. You're releasing versions of you that were built to survive, not to thrive. Think about a seed. Before it becomes a tree, it has to be buried in the dark. It has to break open. It has to let go of what it was to become what it's meant to be. That's not destruction. That's transformation. And the same thing is happening to you. You're not breaking down, you're breaking open. Sometimes growth looks like standing alone. Sometimes it looks like taking risks that scare you. Sometimes it looks like walking away from what you once thought you couldn't live without. And in those moments, your mind will scream for comfort, for the familiar, for the easy way out. But the version of you that you're becoming, that stronger, more grounded, more authentic version, is waiting on the other side of discomfort. The truth is, if you want to grow, you have to stop asking for things to be easy. Instead, start asking to be equipped. Ask for patience. Ask for resilience. Ask for wisdom. Because life doesn't get easier, you get stronger. Every challenge that shows up isn't there to break you, it's there to build you. It's training you for the next level of your life. And some growth means solitude. It means being willing to sit with yourself, no distractions, no noise, and face the parts of you that need healing. That's not loneliness. That's self-discovery. That's where you meet the real you. Because when you can be alone and still feel whole, that's when you've truly grown. People will tell you to stay grounded, but they'll forget to mention that roots only grow deep when the soil is disturbed. Your discomfort, your uncertainty, your struggles, they're the shaking of that soil. They're what allow your roots to dig deeper, your foundation to strengthen, your purpose to take hold. You'll know you're growing when things that used to trigger you no longer do. When you stop chasing validation, when you start choosing long-term peace over short-term pleasure, when you look back and realize the things that once terrified you are now part of your normal. That's evolution, that's growth. So if right now you're in a season of discomfort, if things feel uncertain, if life feels like it's stretching you, don't resist it, don't rush it, don't wish it away. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. Every challenge, every ending, every uncomfortable truth is shaping you into the person who can handle what's coming next. And when you finally come out on the other side, stronger, wiser, unshakable, you'll understand that the pain wasn't the end of your story. It was the part that woke you up to your power. Growth is uncomfortable because you're meeting the version of yourself you've always been meant to be. There comes a time in your life when you realize that not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone deserves your energy, your time, your mind, or your heart. And it's not about arrogance, it's about awareness. You start to understand that your energy is sacred. What you give your attention to either builds you or breaks you. Either expands you or drains you. Protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's survival, it's maturity, it's self-respect. For a long time, you probably said yes to everything. You try to be there for everyone. You carried other people's pain like it was your responsibility to fix them. You let people's chaos become your problem because you thought being kind meant being available. But here's the truth. You can't heal anyone by destroying yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup and expect to keep overflowing. The strongest version of you doesn't say yes out of guilt or fear. It says yes out of alignment. It says yes when your heart feels it, not when your mind is pressured into it. Because when you start living like that, when your decisions are made from peace instead of people pleasing, everything about your life begins to shift. You start to notice the energy around you. You start to feel when something or someone is pulling you out of balance. That pit in your stomach when you're around certain people. That's not anxiety. That's your spirit saying, this doesn't belong here anymore. You start realizing that protecting your energy isn't just about avoiding negativity. It's about being intentional about where your focus goes. Energy flows where attention goes. Every time you engage in gossip, every time you chase people who don't value you, every time you replay a conversation that already ended, you're leaking power. You're feeding things that don't feed you back. But when you start guarding that energy, when you start saying, no, not this time, or no, that's not for me, something incredible happens. You reclaim your life. You take your power back. Protecting your energy doesn't mean you cut everyone off or walk around with walls up. It means you learn discernment. You learn to recognize who adds to your peace and who subtracts from it. You learn to distinguish between people who genuinely support you and those who just want your attention. You learn to stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. You start to choose silence over drama, solitude over noise, growth over gossip. And that shift, that quiet inner shift, is when your energy begins to transform. You start vibrating differently. You start attracting peace because you've become peaceful. You start drawing people who match your frequency, not because you went looking for them, but because your energy made it clear who's allowed in and who's not. It's not always easy, though. The moment you start protecting your energy, you'll notice resistance. Some people will say you've changed, and they're right. You have. You're no longer available for the same cycles. You're no longer entertaining what drains you. You're no longer apologizing for outgrowing people or places that don't align with your purpose. You've learned that protecting your energy sometimes means disappointing others, but it's a small price to pay for finally honoring yourself. You'll know you're growing when peace feels better than attention, when no becomes easier than over-explaining, when your circle gets smaller but your life feels lighter, when you no longer feel the need to prove your worth by being everywhere for everyone. That's the shift from exhaustion to empowerment. And protecting your energy isn't just about people, it's about habits too. It's about what you consume, what you allow into your mind, the shows you watch, the news you dwell on, the conversations you entertain, they all shape your energy. You have to become intentional about what you feed your mind and soul. because your environment will always reflect your inner state. You can't stay peaceful if you live in constant chaos. Sometimes protecting your energy means setting boundaries, firm, loving boundaries. And here's the truth. Boundaries don't push people away. They reveal who was never meant to stay. The ones who respect your boundaries will rise with you. The ones who resist them will fall away. Either way you win, you'll start realizing that peace doesn't need defending. It just needs protecting. You don't have to fight for your energy. You just have to guard it. You don't have to explain your boundaries. You just have to live them. And the more you practice this, the more power you reclaim. You'll stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself. You'll stop apologizing for needing rest, silence, or space. You'll stop explaining why you can't keep carrying everyone else's burdens. Because you'll understand protecting your energy is how you stay strong enough to give from overflow, not from emptiness. When you start choosing your peace, your world doesn't shrink, it refines. The noise fades. The distractions disappear. And what's left is focus, clarity, alignment. You begin to live intentionally. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop surviving and start creating. And that's when you realize the strongest version of you is never about doing more or being more. It was about protecting what makes you powerful in the first place, your energy. Because when your energy is right, your life aligns. There's a quiet moment that comes after you've fought, after you've fallen, after you've questioned everything. A moment when you realize that maybe you don't need to have all the answers. Maybe you just need to trust the process. Trust that everything you've been through wasn't random, that every delay, every detour, every heartbreak was preparing you for something greater. That's when real strength starts to show, not in control, but in faith. Trusting the process doesn't mean sitting back and doing nothing. It means believing that what you're doing, who you're becoming, and where you're headed are all aligning, even if you can't see it yet. It's walking into the unknown with your head high and your heart open. It's understanding that growth isn't always visible. Sometimes it's happening underground in silence, in spaces no one else can see. There's this illusion we all chase, that life should make sense, that everything should happen on our timeline. We tell ourselves, be this age, I should be here, or by now I should have this. But that's not how life works. Life has its own rhythm, its own timing. And the more you try to force it, the more frustrated you become. But when you start trusting the process, you stop fighting the current. You stop trying to control outcomes that were never meant to be controlled. You start realizing that patience isn't passive. It's powerful. Think about the times you thought something was falling apart, only to realize later it was actually falling into place. Maybe the door that closed wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Maybe that setback wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Maybe life wasn't denying you, it was developing you. The truth is, some of your biggest blessings only make sense in hindsight. When you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see. It's hard to believe that there's a bigger picture when all you can see are the broken pieces. But strength isn't about having clarity all the time. It's about having faith in the dark. It's about believing that even when it doesn't feel like it, something good is still being built out of the chaos. Trust is hard because it requires surrender. It requires admitting that you can't control everything. And for most of us, that's terrifying. We think control equals safety, but control is often the biggest thief of peace. The moment you stop gripping so tightly, the moment you let go of your need to know how everything will turn out, that's when space opens up for something greater to unfold. When you start trusting the process, you begin to notice that life has a rhythm. It's like the seasons. You can't rush spring and you can't skip winter. Some seasons are for planting, some are for pruning, some are for blooming. And just because it's not your season to shine doesn't mean your time isn't coming. Your job isn't to rush it. It's to stay faithful, to keep showing up, to keep watering your roots, even when there are no signs of flowers yet. There's a difference between waiting and trusting. Waiting is passive. It's hoping something will change. Trusting is active. It's knowing that something is already changing, even if you can't see it yet. You keep doing the work. You keep showing up. You keep giving your best, not because you're guaranteed the result, but because you believe the process is shaping you into the person who can handle what's coming. And maybe that's what trust really is, believing in your own resilience. Believing that no matter what happens, you'll figure it out. You'll grow from it. You'll find a way. Because the strongest version of you doesn't need everything to be perfect before taking a step forward. You move even when it's uncertain. You act even when it's uncomfortable. You keep going because you trust yourself. And that's where real freedom begins. When you look back at everything you've survived, the moments you thought would break you, the situations that made no sense, you start to see the pattern. You realize that every time you fell, you rose stronger. Every time something ended, something new began. Every no led you closer to the right lies, and that gives you a deeper sense of peace. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you finally understand that everything's connected. You stop rushing, you stop comparing, you stop questioning your worth based on where you are. You start finding gratitude in the process itself, because even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's uncertain, it's still progress. You're being shaped, refined, strengthened in ways you may not yet understand, but one day you will. That's what trusting the process looks like. It's not blind optimism, it's grounded faith. It's knowing that you are exactly where you need to be to become who you're meant to become. It's understanding that even in silence, even in stillness, even in confusion, life is working for you, not against you. And when you trust the process, when you trust yourself, something powerful happens. You stop chasing strength because you realize you become it.